Is this like the part where you guys have your way with me?
What?
You know, where I'm like helpless and you guys take turns, you know?
Oh, no! Oh! Did you know that 100% of Family Guy characters are certifiably bonkers? Okay, I made that up, but after watching this video, you might think it's true. We're about to break down the mental state of your favorite Quahog residents. From daddy issues to mommy issues to whatever the heck Stewie's got going on. It's time to get uncomfortably real with our cartoon pals. Alright, let's dive into the wild world of Peter Griffin's hypothetical therapy session. Picture this, Peter waddles into the therapist's office, probably knocking over a plant or two on his way in. He plops down on the couch and you can almost hear it groan under his weight. The therapist, trying to maintain a professional demeanor, asks Peter about his childhood. Now, you'd think Peter would start with something normal, right? Nope. He launches into a story about the time he thought he was a fish for a week. He's going on about how he kept trying to breathe underwater in the bathtub and how Lois had to lure him out with fish sticks. The therapist is scribbling notes furiously, probably wondering if they should have gone into a less interesting field. But as Peter rambles on, jumping from one crazy story to another, our shrink starts to notice a pattern. It's not just Peter being Peter, there's something deeper going on here. All these wild tales, they're not just for laughs, they're Peter's way of escaping reality. It's like he's got this constant need to be the center of attention, to live in a world where normal rules don't apply. The therapist's wheels are turning now. They're thinking, okay, we've got impulsivity, poor decision making, difficulty focusing, and don't even get me started on his relationship with that giant chicken. It's starting to look like Peter might be dealing with some ADHD. But that's not all. There's a whole cocktail of potential issues brewing here. You've got to wonder about Peter's emotional stability too. One minute he's declaring his undying love for Lois, the next he's off on some harebrained scheme that puts the whole family at risk. It's like his emotions are on a roller coaster and everyone else is just along for the ride. The therapist is probably considering some personality disorder traits in the mix too. But here's the thing about Peter. For all his faults, the guy's got a heart of gold. The therapist can't help but notice how, despite all the chaos, Peter really does love his family. He might show it in the weirdest ways possible, but it's there. It's like his loyalty and capacity for love are fighting a constant battle with his impulse control, and losing most of the time. So what's the final verdict on our favorite Quahog resident? Well, it's complicated. We're looking at a mix of potential ADHD, some borderline personality traits, and a hefty dose of what we'll call Peterism. That special brand of chaos that only Peter Griffin can bring to the table. The therapist's prescription, maybe start by laying off the Pawtucket Pats and see where that gets us. Alright, so we've just wrapped up Peter's session, and now it's time for Lois to take the hot seat. You might think the therapist would get a breather after dealing with Peter, but nope, Lois is about to give them a run for their money. So Lois walks in, looking like the perfect suburban mom. She starts talking about her daily life. You know, the usual stuff. Cooking, cleaning, trying to keep Peter from burning down the house. Pretty normal, right? Well, hold on to your notepads, because things are about to get wild. Out of nowhere, Lois casually mentions her occasional crime sprees. Yeah, you heard that right. Our redheaded wonder's idea of a fun night out involves less book club and more Grand Theft Auto. The therapist's pen nearly falls out of their hand. I mean, can you blame them? One minute they're hearing about PTA meetings, the next it's all, oh, and sometimes I rob banks for funsies. But here's the kicker. Lois doesn't seem to think this is a big deal. She's chatting about her adrenaline-seeking behavior, like she's talking about her favorite recipe for meatloaf. The therapist's trying to keep it cool, but you can see the wheels turning in their head. As Lois keeps talking, a pattern starts to emerge. It's like she's got two versions of herself. Lois the mom and Lois the wild child. And these two Loises, they're not exactly getting along. One minute she's all about being the perfect wife and mother. The next she's ready to throw it all away for a taste of danger. The therapist's taking notes so fast you'd think their pen was on fire. They're seeing signs of histrionic personality disorder. You know, that need to be the center of attention, the dramatic flair, the whole shebang. But wait, there's more. Those sudden outbursts and crime sprees? Classic signs of intermittent explosive disorder. So what's the doc's prescription for our favorite Quahog housewife? Well, they're thinking Lois needs some serious me time, but maybe instead of knocking over liquor stores, she could try knocking out some punching bags. You know, channel that wild energy into something a little less felonious. Alright, it's time to dive into Chris Griffin's therapy session, and let me tell you, this one's gonna be interesting. You might think you've got Chris all figured out, but our therapist is about to uncover a mind that's anything but simple. So Chris lumbers into the office, nearly knocking over a potted plant in the process. The therapist braces for impact, both physically and mentally, but as soon as Chris starts talking, it's clear we're in for a surprise. This isn't just gonna be an hour of fart jokes and confused stares. Chris opens up about feeling different and misunderstood. He starts rambling about his invisible giraffe friend and his fear of the evil monkey in his closet. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, that's just Chris being Chris. But our therapist is picking up on something else. There's a method to this madness. As Chris keeps talking, the doc's wheels start turning. It turns out there's way more to our gentle giant than meets the eye. All those seemingly random thoughts, they're actually connected in Chris's mind. It's like he's got this whole universe going on up there, and we're just getting a glimpse of it. The therapist realizes that Chris isn't slow. He just sees the world in a completely different way. It's like he's got this unique lens that filters everything, and sometimes that makes it hard for him to connect with others. But when you really listen to what he's saying, there's some pretty deep stuff in there. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The therapist starts to notice some patterns in Chris's behavior and thought processes. The way he fixates on certain topics, his difficulty with social cues, and that vivid imagination of his, it all starts to point in a certain direction. Diagnosis drop time. Chris is showing signs of being on the autism spectrum, but here's the kicker. That imagination of his, it's not just random weirdness. It's actually a sign of some serious creative potential. We're talking Stephen King levels of world building here. The therapist suggests that instead of trying to make Chris fit into some normal box, maybe it's time to embrace his unique perspective. After all, some of the world's greatest thinkers and artists have been on the spectrum. Who knows? Maybe Chris's seemingly nonsensical ramblings could be the next great American novel in the making. 5. Meg Griffin, the Black Sheep's Hidden Depths. Alright, let's shift gears and talk about the Griffin family's most overlooked member. Meg Griffin, the perpetual punching bag of Quahog, finally gets her moment in the therapist's chair, and let me tell you, it's about to get real. So Meg walks into the office, probably expecting the therapist to ignore her like everyone else does. But plot twist, they actually pay attention to her. I know, shocking, right? The doc asks her to take a seat, and Meg's so surprised she almost falls off the chair. Now Meg starts talking, and it's like opening a floodgate. Years of family neglect, school bullying, and being the butt of every joke have taken their toll. She talks about how her dad uses her as a human shield, how her mom once sold her to pay off a debt, and how even the family dog treats her like garbage. It's enough to make you wonder how she's still standing. The therapist listens, really listens, maybe for the first time in Meg's life. They're seeing past the beanie and glasses to the person underneath, and what they see is pretty impressive. Despite everything, Meg's still trying. She's got goals, dreams, and a determination that would make a bulldog jealous. But there's also a darker side to Meg. As she opens up, it becomes clear that there's a simmering anger just below the surface. She talks about her fantasies of revenge, her desperate need for validation, and the times she's lashed out violently. Remember when she joined a prison gang, or when she held her family hostage? Yeah, those weren't just quirky sitcom hijinks. The therapist's notepad is filling up fast. They're seeing signs of persistent depressive disorder, also known as dysthymia. It's like depression's annoying cousin that overstays its welcome. Meg's been dealing with low self-esteem, hopelessness, and poor concentration for years. And let's not forget the social anxiety that makes her break out in stress-induced acne every time she tries to talk to a cute guy. But here's the kicker. The therapist also sees untapped potential. Meg's resilience is off the charts. I mean, anyone else would have cracked years ago, right? The doc suggests that with the right support and some serious family therapy, Meg could really come into her own. 6. Stewie Griffin, the diabolical baby genius. Now, let's take a look at the Griffin family's youngest member. You might think a baby would be the easiest patient, but Stewie's about to turn that idea on its head. What happens when a 1-year-old with the vocabulary of a college professor and the ambitions of a supervillain lies down on the therapist's couch? We're about to find out. Stewie toddles into the office, and the therapist immediately notices something's off. This kid's got a look in his eye that says, "I'm plotting your demise," which is pretty intense for someone who still needs diapers. The session starts, and boy, is it a doozy. Our pint-sized patient launches into a monologue about his latest scheme to take over the world. The therapist is frantically scribbling notes, trying to keep up as Stewie switches between baby babble and complex quantum mechanics theories. It's like listening to Stephen Hawking, if Stephen Hawking was really into Sesame Street. As the session goes on, it becomes clear that Stewie's got more issues than a comic book convention. There's his weird obsession with Lois, which goes way beyond normal mother-son bonding. The kid's got some serious mommy issues, and not in the I want a cookie way, more in the I want to eliminate you from existence way. Then there's the violence. Most kids his age are learning to share toys, but Stewie's more interested in turning them into weapons of mass destruction. The therapist's thinking, is this a baby or a Bond villain? And let's not forget the gender confusion. One minute he's all macho world dominator, the next he's putting on a Broadway show in his room. The poor therapist is in way over their head. They're used to dealing with my dog ate my homework excuses, not my dog ate the plutonium I need for my doomsday device. It's clear that Stewie's showing signs of, well, everything. We're talking potential antisocial personality disorder, a textbook Oedipus complex, and maybe even some time traveler's syndrome, if that's a thing. By the end of the session, the therapist's notepad is a mess of diagnoses, question marks, and doodles of ray guns. They're seriously considering a career change. Maybe accounting would be less stressful? 7. Glenn Quagmire, the Casanova with a dark side. Alright, let's dive into the wild world of Glenn Quagmire. You know, the guy who can't walk into a room without making everyone feel a little uncomfortable. As our favorite ladies' man saunters into the therapist's office, you can practically hear the giggity echoing off the walls. Now, Quagmire starts talking, and it's like opening Pandora's box of questionable life choices. Between tales of his conquest that would make Casanova blush, he's dropping some seriously concerning details. The therapist's pen is flying across the notepad, trying to keep up with the flood of red flags. As the session goes on, we're starting to see past the catchphrases and charm. There's something darker lurking beneath the surface of our resident Casanova. The therapist is probably thinking, is this guy for real, or is he just playing a character he can't escape? It's like watching a train wreck in slow motion, but instead of a train, it's a lifetime of bad decisions. There's a pattern here that's impossible to ignore. Quagmire has got this constant need for validation that's off the charts. He objectifies women like it's going out of style. Newsflash, it went out of style a long time ago. And don't even get me started on the risky behavior. This guy's idea of a good time would make an adrenaline junkie say, whoa, maybe we should slow down. So what's the diagnosis for our friend Glenn? Well, buckle up because it's a doozy. We're looking at textbook signs of sex addiction, with a hefty dose of narcissistic personality disorder thrown in for good measure. It's like he's trying to fill a void with, well, you know, the therapist's advice. Quagmire needs some serious introspection, like lock yourself in a cabin in the woods level of soul searching. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for a long break from dating. Also, a little suggestion, try going 5 minutes without saying giggity. It might be tough, but I believe in you, buddy. 8. Cleveland Brown, the calm in the storm. Alright, let's take a look at Cleveland Brown, the human equivalent of a warm glass of milk. After the whirlwind that is Quagmire, our poor therapist probably needs a breather, but is Cleveland really the calm he appears to be? There's more to this laid-back guy than meets the eye. Cleveland strolls into the office. Cool as ever, he settles into the couch like he's about to take a nap, and the therapist breathes a sigh of relief. Finally, a patient who isn't trying to take over the world or turn the session into a Pawtucket Pats commercial. Our mellow man starts talking about his life, his time in Quahog and Stool Bend, and his friends. At first, it seems like Cleveland's got it all together. He's got that soothing voice, that easygoing attitude, but as he keeps talking, the therapist starts to notice some things. There's a pattern here. Cleveland's always the guy who goes along with whatever crazy scheme his friends cook up. He's the one who ends up in ridiculous situations, but never seems to complain. The therapist's thinking, this guy's so laid back, he's practically horizontal, but at what cost? Cleveland's stories reveal a man who's a bit too accepting of the chaos around him. He talks about how he's always there for his friends, even when they're not exactly returning the favor. He mentions how he's cool with Peter's antics, even when they end up with him in harm's way. The therapist's eyebrows are starting to rise. As the session goes on, it becomes clear that Cleveland's chill demeanor isn't all sunshine and rainbows. He's letting people walk all over him, repressing his true feelings. The therapist's notepad is filling up with phrases like conflict avoidance and excessive agreeableness. The diagnosis drops. Cleveland's showing signs of dependent personality disorder with a side of conflict avoidance. Our man Cleveland is so afraid of rocking the boat that he's willing to sink with it. The therapist's advice: learn to say no once in a while, Cleveland. Stand up for yourself. It's okay to ruffle a few feathers now and then. 9. Joe Swanson, the hero with hidden battles. Alright, let's wheel into Joe Swanson's therapy session. This guy's about to crash into our shrink's office, but here's the thing. Can you spot the cracks in his tough guy armor before our therapist does? Joe Swanson rolls in, all muscles and machismo. He's talking a mile a minute about his latest arrest, how he tackled a perp with his face, and how he's been bench pressing his own wheelchair for funsies. The therapist nods along, but there's a glint in their eye. They've seen this before. The overcompensation, the need to prove oneself. It's like Joe's trying to outrun his own demons, except, well, you know. As Joe shares more stories, a pattern emerges. There's a lot of anger bubbling under the surface, masked by jokes and bravado. When he talks about his family, his voice gets a little tighter. He mentions how he's always in control at work, but at home, that's where things get messy. The therapist's notepad is filling up fast. Joe's got more mood swings than a playground, and his obsession with his physical condition is off the charts. It's like he's stuck in a constant battle with his own body, trying to prove he's still the same Joe he was before the accident. But here's the kicker. Joe's not just fighting criminals, he's fighting time itself. He talks about the good old days when he could chase down perps on foot, and there's a hint of something in his voice. Sadness? Frustration? It's hard to tell with all the yelling. The therapist's thinking, this guy's carrying more emotional baggage than a teen girl at a sleepover. They've seen it before. The struggle to adjust to a major life change, the anxiety about the future, the depression about the past. It's a classic case of adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. Joe's constant need to be the hero, to be in control, it's all tied up in his struggle to accept his new reality. He's still trying to be the same Joe he was before the accident, and it's eating him up inside. 10. Herbert, the neighbor with troubling tendencies. Alright, let's take a deep breath because our next patient is Herbert. You know that old guy who's always hanging around the playground with his dog? Yeah, that one. As he shuffles into the office, the therapist is already looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Herbert starts talking, and boy is it a doozy. He's going on about how the couch reminds him of his youth, specifically the texture. The therapist is trying to keep a straight face, but you can see them eyeing the panic button under the desk. It's gonna be a long session, folks. Our friendly neighborhood creep is in full swing now, reminiscing about the good old days when shorts were shorter and summer camps were less supervised. The therapist is scribbling notes so fast you'd think they were writing the next great American novel, but nope, just documenting a whole parade of red flags. Things take a turn for the worse when Herbert starts talking about his favorite hobby, watching the local Little League games. He's got opinions on every player's form and potential. The therapist is trying to maintain professionalism, but they're definitely calculating the distance to the door. As Herbert rambles on, a disturbing pattern emerges. His fixation on youth isn't just a quirky old man thing, it's a full-blown obsession. He talks about feeling isolated from adults his age, preferring the company of young whippersnappers. The therapist is thinking, this is way above my pay grade. Where's Chris Hansen when you need him? Herbert's past comes up, and it's not great. He mentions some misunderstandings with parents in his old neighborhood and how he had to move. The therapist is connecting some very unsettling dots here. Now, we're not ones to armchair diagnose, but the therapist is definitely leaning towards a certain conclusion. Herbert's showing clear signs of pedophilic disorder. Yeah, we're going there. It's not just creepy behavior, it's a serious mental health issue with potential real-world consequences. The therapist's advice? Intensive therapy, no contact with minors, and maybe consider moving to a deserted island, far, far away. They're also making a mental note to call the authorities as soon as Herbert leaves. 11. Conclusion. Well, folks, we've just taken a wild ride through the minds of Quahog's most colorful characters. Who knew that beneath all those crazy antics and one-liners, there was a whole mess of psychological issues? I mean, we always knew these guys were a bit off, but now we've got the professional diagnosis to prove it. From Peter's possible ADHD to Stewie's, well, everything. It seems like the Griffin household is more of a case study than a family home. And don't even get me started on the supporting cast. Quagmire might want to invest in some serious therapy sessions, and Cleveland, well, he might need a spine transplant before he can stand up for himself. But hey, maybe that's why we love them so much. They're just like us. Flawed, complicated, and in desperate need of professional help. So next time you're watching Family Guy, remember, you're not just laughing at jokes, you're witnessing a full-blown group therapy session. Now, who's up for a trip to the Drunken Clam?